You can forget a lot of things, Foster Care Nation, but never forget this. You're listening to Unparalleled Studios.
I signal.
Okay, citizens of Foster Care Nation, we want to hear from you. We want to hear any stories that you'd like to share with us, anything that might be funny, inspiring, touching, heartfelt, all of those things. That's what people love to hear. So why don't you send us some of your stories? You can reach us at our voicemail line at 413-FOSTER-3. Again, that's 413-FOSTER-3. Now, we're going to assume that if there's any privacy rules that you need to follow, you've already followed them and changed any names that need to be changed, because we will play some of this on the air. We look forward to hearing from you. Now, this voicemail has a limit of about, I think, 10 or 15 minutes, so anything longer than that, just contact me at jason@fostercarenation.com, and we can sit down and talk about your whole story. Foster Care Nation, listen up. This is
Foster care and unparalleled journey.
Strength for the powerless, courage for the fearful, hope and healing for wounded hearts. Hello and welcome back to Foster Care Nation with Jason
And Amanda.
And today we have Darren Fink with us again.
Yeah!
How you doing today, Darren?
I'm doing awesome. I love that. I love that applause. It brightens my day. I need to hire those people to just follow me around and encourage me.
I have it on my phone, so I can just hit it every time I do something I think is awesome. I tried training my wife to do it for me, but it didn't work.
After 20 years, you get a little tired.
So you're welcome. You welcome the button then, right?
Yes. Gives me a break.
Yeah, buddy. All right. If this voice sounds familiar to you at all, we've talked to Darren before. Darren and Margie, his wife, have Transfiguring Adoption as their non-for-profit, and we have talked to them about what they do over there in the past. And right about now, one of the cool things that they're doing is there is a book out there for sale coming up very, very soon. I think the 11th of October. Is that right?
Close. It's the 19th, actually. It's coming out. So
man.
yeah, you had it all. You're right there. You were so close.
So when this comes out, if you're listening to it fresh, it should be within a week or two. Or if you're listening to it in part of the back catalog, it's already there. Go find it. The book is Gruhits Hope. And I would not spell that right if I was going to search for it. Darren, how do you spell that? Let's get it right.
It is GRUHIT''S and then Hope. And it's part of our Guide to Magical Creatures Around Your Home series that we're building out. So if you like Harry Potter, Narnia, Lord of the Rings, that's what our critics are telling us. This book is all mashed up and in one big goulash.
You know, a couple of those things sound like they might be kind of popular. I think that it might fit into the category of things people are looking to find out there.
Absolutely. It's been actually a lot of fun. With any book coming out, you're nervous to give it out to people, to critics, to see what they're going to say. But so far, the critics have said only nice things about the book. So that's been really pleasing to me. And one thing that I'm not worried about or concerned about, but you don't want your book to get caught in a niche where for example, with Transfiguring Adoption, we're obviously making sure that we're helping foster and adoptive kids, foster and adoptive families. But the book does so much to show the general public what foster kids are going through, that we want the general public to learn from it too. So one thing that's really exciting about this is that critics are telling us that they're just really excited. It's an entertaining book and it's a lot of fun. People that they said their fantasy isn't even their genre are saying they're hooked on it by chapter 2 and ready to read on. So yeah, it's been great so far.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Because, yeah, I mean, if you get right down to it, the adoption story is one of the oldest stories in the world. I mean, Harry Potter really falls right into that genre. A lot of I had to remember. It's been some years since I read all the Chronicles of Narnia, but there was a lot of stories out
Right.
there with kids who had an adventure that did not involve their biological parents guiding them through that. They had to find their own way.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, and one thing that we're really trying with this book that we're really trying to break through is with your audience, we're talking. I'm talking to a lot of foster and adoptive folks, people that are on the journey in some role, whether you're a foster parent, adoptive parent, a professional, maybe you're being a former foster youth listening. So one thing that we're really trying to look at is with all of those stories too that you see with orphans or kids in foster care being adopted, is they don't always get it right. They're not looking at it really like what's happening. And so because of that, I feel like our children that are in the foster care system or they've been adopted, they can't relate to those characters completely. Or if they do, they're getting it in their head that that Daddy Warbucks is going to show up at the orphanage at some point and whisk them away and adopt them, and they're going to belong to a billionaire and get anything they ever, or like things are going to wrap up in neat little bows. And what we're Gruhits Hope, it's been nice for foster and adoptive families because it's not roses and rainbows. Like, it's entertaining, it's fun. It is targeted for a middle school to high school audience, even older elementary, depending on maturity. But so it is fun, and it has like a kid-like fun to it, but we're being real with it. So there are things that are going on there, like the main character is mixed race, and he's moving to a small town and that's predominantly Caucasian. So he is having to deal with racial prejudice. He's having to deal with a school bully. He's having to deal with the fact that he doesn't know anything. Like, there's one chapter where he's asking them, like, do they work at my, like, are they farmers? Are we gonna have to work all the time? Like, do they even speak English at my new home? Like he's having all these questions and wonderings and trying to figure out, what's my new foster home gonna be like? So I think foster and adoptive parents are gonna be really pleased with this one, because it really opens up an atmosphere of discussion with their kids.
You know, that story of a brown kid in a white world is one of those stories that needs to be told, because it's a lot of the story of foster care and adoption. It's all these groups together that aren't necessarily always that put together.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's and I mean, like any author, like, I'm drawing off of some life experiences. Like, I know a lot of people, like, even my kids are like, they when I use my kids as a sounding board, because we have 4 kids adopted out of foster care, and I'll use them as a sounding board for, like, is this good? Is this not? Like, and as I'm reading the chapters, they're like, is that me? Is that character me? That can't, like, and then I'm like, no, that's not, like, and I'm very intentional that I'm drawing on life experiences, but I'm definitely embellishing things, or I mean, it still could happen, but I'm not, like, these aren't my kids. Like, there are 3 foster kiddos that are the main part of the story, and their foster parents. And there is a lot of, if you live, fun fact, if you live in or near Murfreesboro, Illinois, if you took the book around and you started reading, you could probably find some of the landmarks in the book around that small city, or small town, I should say. But yeah, everything's kind of embellished. It could really happen. There's one moment in there with a teacher, and again, it's not a true thing. Like, I have to be very intentional, because I'll have, like, my kids' past teachers listening and like, was that me? No, it's not. But there are instances, like, we work with so many foster parents. I've heard so many times where there's one point where Gruhit has to deal with a teacher, and he doesn't even realize the 2nd grade teacher is kind of being prejudiced with him because he's in foster care, to the point where at the end of the school day, she keeps giving him kind of more instructions not to get in trouble than the other kids. And so at the end of the school day, like, she's dismissing kids to go get to the bus line or to go to the parent pickup line. And at one part in the book, she calls Gruhit up after his first day of school and says, hey, can you come up to my desk? But she didn't do this to any of the other kids. She calls him especially up to and says, did you have a good first day? Yeah. And says, do you think you can find the bus line without getting in any trouble? And she didn't ask any of the other kids that. She just told them to go, go, like it's your turn, go. And so there are just little instances like that, even where I've seen, I guess, the general population not understanding foster kids even, and just thinking that they've come from a troubled background. And so they really have to watch them because they think they're going to get in trouble. So even maybe not even racial prejudice, but just even the prejudice of being in foster care. I feel like some of our kids can relate to that. And there's actually, if you guys read it, spoiler, there's like a fun, there's a Halloween party and the teacher wants to talk to the foster parents in this kind of this sense of, I want to help Gruhit, but she's very much calling him out and like, I think he's a troubled person. And I think he's like, she has this sense of like making it sound good, but it's not. And the foster parents come to his rescue and kind of put the teacher, like, I don't want to say in her place, but like kind of set her straight on like, I don't think we're going to talk about him like this, right? Because he's a student and he's a little boy. And I think it's really cool because foster parents and foster kids will be able to relate to that part, because I think we've all been there where we feel like our kids are being judged, our families are being judged. And I think for the general public, even educators, instead of getting defensive about stuff like that, like, well, I would never, I think it's a good time to stop back and just be like, what do I think of foster kids? Because this is happening, you guys. This is the prejudice against foster kids happens because we judge their background. So I think it's a good time for everyone in the general public to take a step back and just say, wow, if that's happening, how would I react in that situation? What should I be doing so that doesn't happen? And there are just moments like that throughout the book.
Oh yeah, we've had our fair share of experiences. When it comes just down to straight up racial issues, I have a guy I worked with, and don't get me wrong, good guy, I like him, but he made the mistake one day of looking at me in the face and saying, I don't think racism really even exists in America anymore. And I said, of course you don't. You're a white guy with red hair who lives in middle Missouri who's never experienced that stuff. But you look like everybody in your town, dude.
Right.
And, yeah, he got about a 30-minute lecture on some of the things that I've just personally seen and experienced. And, even when it comes to from teachers or administrators who will say things that make you just cringe, I've had that moment where I walked into a principal's office one day and said, we need to have a conversation. He said, okay. I said, hang on, I'm going to close this door because the kids don't need to hear what I'm about to say, because we're going to talk like grown men here. We're not talking like kindergartners or second grade teachers will. We're going to talk like grown men because I have an issue. And fortunately, that particular principal, call him, what's his name? Mr. Marshall, wasn't it?
Yes.
And Mr. Marshall, he was a good dude. The issue was with one of the teachers. He was, I think it was an adoptive parent himself, if I remember right.
I believe it was.
So he had ears to hear was the big thing. And so one conversation, and we fixed all of our problems immediately. But it's those things that really do happen. And most people don't realize the prejudices that they do carry with them. I carry some of them myself. We all do.
Absolutely. And even with going back to the book, like even with the main character, not only is he dealing with the foster care, having kids judge him because he's a foster kid and in the foster care system, but he has to deal with the fact that his skin looks different than the rest of his classmates. And he has one student in particular her name is Judy, that sits next to him, and her family is very prominent in this small little town. And I think if you're American and you're listening to this, you can identify with like the small town mentality of like, there have been families that have been there for generations, maybe that started the town, and it's hard to change that way of thinking. And you have some families that are more prominent than other, like so she belongs to this prominent white family, and she very much bullies Gruhit because of his, and says things to him like, I bet your parents, because they're in second grade, so it's like, I bet your parents are gang members or they did drugs and that's why they can't take care of you. Like, do they live in the projects? And like making all these assumptions because he has dark skin. Like, this is obviously his, and he's in foster care. That obviously means his parents were in a gang. Without, and just making that judge, and just like, so I mean, and that does, and again, I'm drawing off of life stories and experiences that I've heard and witnessed, and that's happening in small town America and in America at large. And so I think it's one thing that I like tackling in the book is there's a conversation between the foster dad and Gruhit at one point, just about all this stuff and all these feelings and all these things that are happening, and then showing in the book too that the foster dad actually steps in at certain moments, not calling Gruhit, like not saying like, hey, my son told me you're bullying him, but just kind of stepping in and being that barrier between the bully and Gruhit, and talking to the little girl without directly coming out in front of her, but kind of putting her in her place too, and kind of saying like, hey, like there's not going to be a problem or else I'm going to talk to your dad, type of thing. And like defend, and I think our foster and adoptive kiddos need to see that as caregivers, if they are having issues and they talk to us about something, we're going to step in for them. And we, like Jason, like you were talking about, talking to the principal, like our kids, because they've come from situations where maybe there weren't adults on duty that would step in for them or take notice. And so they need to see that we as caring people will step in, like no matter what the situation is. Like if it's bothering them, we're going to step in and take care of them on their behalf, and they don't have to do this by themselves. Like, so I feel like that's a different divergence from other media in the past too, where it's like I'm thinking of like fun movies that like I've had a lot of people say, like Hotel for Dogs. Like they love the movie. That's because it's funny and it's these kids doing all these things with dogs and creating a hotel for but it's these kids in foster care and they have to take care of themselves because no other adult will understand them and step in for them. So the kids have to take everything on and do everything. And so in this book, like I very much wanted to show that if the kids are having issues and problems, the adults will step in and they will figure things out together. And it's not perfect. Like it doesn't, like there are issues in the book and like we don't candy coat stuff. There are issues, but somehow like through this whole mess, you figure it out. I think as a family.
Yeah, it's an important message for foster parents to hear that just the same as you would for your own kids, you need to be willing to step in. Every kid deserves somebody who's willing to fight for them.
Absolutely. It gives you, it really gives you hope. Like, the title says Gruhits Hope. It gives you hope and it gives you encouragement so that you can keep going on. I remember a mantra growing up that my dad used to use a lot was, because I was bullied at school. And so like being able to say, hey, you're going to go to school, you're going to do the best you can. When you come home, we love you, we're proud of you, always. Like, so just like telling me every day, you're going to go out there, it's uncertain, be brave, get it done, and then come home where you're loved and safe and you're always accepted. And that was a huge message for me. And I think it's one that our foster and adoptive kiddos especially need to be hearing, because they have the added struggle of their whole life being turned upside down in some way or shape or form.
And feeling like the whole world knows about their story too, I'm certain, because just last week on the episode there, that was Darius Kimberling was talking about that. He was a young guy who was in foster care in Amarillo, Texas, I want to say it was. And as a mixed kid, he's like I thought I was the only kid like in the whole world who was in foster care. And everybody knew it, and everybody knew that about me, and that was the place. He talked very much about how that was the place that he came from. He was a kid in foster care. He was expected to have problems. He was expected to be a troublemaker because he was in rural Texas in a very white community as a mixed kid, and he was a kid in foster care, and so he was going to be the troublemaker. That's what was expected of him. And I think
that's what his identity was. That's what everybody was telling him. This is your identity. This is who you are. And that's not the case, but especially for our kids that have come through the system, they've lost a lot. And it's our job to help them find some of that back and help with some of their insecurities and help them find their identity, because even kids that are not in the system, they're searching for who they are, and it's our job to teach them.
Well, I think that's part of our problem we have in this world today, is so many young kids never figure that out, and then they grow into adults who don't have that identity. And I mention a lot being part of a dad's group, because some of these problems I see in guys who are 40, 50 years old, who did not go through foster care, who weren't adopted out, who didn't have that loss of first family, didn't have these specific struggles, and they have never figured that out. How much more difficult is that for someone who's been through all those other struggles ahead of time? We had a conversation with our little guy the other day, he said, "Dad, what would you think if I wanted to talk to my biological mom?" And, well, I think if it's something that, if we could do it safely, that's something we can definitely talk about. Why is that? What would you say to her? And we had this whole conversation, and it's clear that he has a lot of questions in his head. And for a young kid who's in elementary school, some of the questions that he came up with were strikingly intense and like, whoa, where did this come from? Like, you're not old enough to be thinking this deeply. What the heck? I mean, where did that come from? How do you have that in your head? But a lot of it is that those struggles that they're going to have to struggle with for a lifetime.
Absolutely. And like with this book, like, so with Transfiguring Adoption, a lot of things that we try to do is we're trying to look at how parents can use movies, books, video games, and even everyday play to connect with their kids, because we really think that through those things we can have those big, heavy discussions, because we're letting our guard down, because we're no longer hitting the heavy discussions. We're no longer having those tough discussions head on. We're having them by looking at other characters, or we're having them in a roundabout way, and we're doing it through play or through something fun. And there's some heavy topics in here, even with through foster care. Gruhit's older sister, Amari, she uses as a coping mechanism that she's happy all the time. So like it constantly through the book, she's sing-songy, she's overly chatty, she's dancing, she's like, and again, drawing off of struggles that other kids we've seen have, where they chatter all the time. Because if you're talking all the time, you don't have to think about the bad past stuff that happened, because you're constantly talking. If you're happy all the time, you think possibly that's what the adults want, and you don't get hit, you don't get hurt, because they want a happy kid. And she even has issues with wetting the bed and like going to the bathroom in places she, like, it's mentioned in there. But like a lot of kids, and young kids or even older kids in the foster care system struggle with that, because it might be a control thing, or they're just scared of the dark. Something bad has happened, as you can imagine, in the dark in their bedroom at some point. And so they're scared to get up to go to the bathroom, because they're scared that something's going to come get them, or a person's going to come into their room. So they don't want to get out of their room. There's some heavy topics there. And so instead of talking directly with our children about this, like, why not look at this book and see it happening to the characters, and then talk about the characters? So then it's not so embarrassing. It's not, you don't feel like there's judgment, because if there's judgment, it's on the character. It's not on me or my child. It's being able to discuss these things in an open and judgment-free zone. And the fun part too about it is we introduce, Gruhit finds out that his foster parents have magical creatures living around their home. And so there's this whole story introduced where there's this invisible world, almost like a Narnia type, except they're not going into another world. It just exists around them. And so they're finding that there are these magical creatures that live around them, and people just have kind of forgotten about them and don't realize that they're there. So it's this fun, entertaining way of introducing conversations about tough topics.
Yeah, because there are lots of those tough topics, and a couple of those you've mentioned. We've had kids with a lot of the the bedwetting issues, and you just name it. I hate to say this out loud. God, this is not a challenge. We've had a lot of the issues that are out there show up in our home. And I always have to throw that extra message to God so he knows I'm not trying to challenge him to show me more.
Right?
Yeah,
no, I hear that.
Yeah.
I give.
Yeah, somebody somewhere told me God won't give you more than you can handle, but we need to have a conversation with him about what we're able to handle, because it gets heavy some days, some of these conversations you have with these kids, some of the things you deal with, some of their coping mechanisms, which can be so very difficult to handle. It's super difficult. So I love that you found a way to take this and take the judgment off of it, because the one thing I've learned about shame is, well, two things. Number one, it's always unhelpful to throw shame into any situation. It never helps. And number two, it doesn't change behavior. It only drives it underground. And so now you have the same behaviors. It's just hiding underground, and you get to deal with it it existing. They just try to hide it from you. And when kids try to hide things, they're not always smart about it.
You think? No, and I've been guilty of sometimes when I'm at the end of my rope and I discover, I'm like, couldn't you hide it better just so I can like live in ignorant bliss for a little bit longer? But no, we actually, like, I'll throw it out there too, because it connects. Is we have a gal that she collaborated with, or she looked through this with us. She's a former foster youth, and we had her look through this book because she consulted with us on it. Felicia Neal, she did an amazing job. She's a former foster youth. She's a foster parent herself now. But it was interesting to have her look through the book, because I'm a foster adoptive dad, but I don't know what it's like from the kid first. So like, it was neat to have her be consulted on it and read through it. And she even, like, it was interesting because there's one part in the book, the foster parents live across the street from this old abandoned factory. And you find out in the book that generations ago, it used to be this thriving business that, the foster dad's family owned. And now it's abandoned, and the oldest child, Chardy, he keeps looking over at it. And she, like, it was interesting when our consultant was reading through it, and she's like, yeah, the book's really good so far. She's like, I got a few changes to make. And she's like, why has that boy not run away from home like 20 times already? And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, there is an abandoned factory across the street. She's like, you cannot tell me he did not sneak out of the house in the middle of the night 20 times by now and go over there and figure out what's over in that factory. And so she didn't know, like, I had already written that he was going over there, like, later in the book. But it was so funny to hear her say that, and to, like, kind of like just give me that, like, I don't know, permission that, like, yeah, I'm on the right trail, like that affirmation that, yeah, this is what needs to happen. But she's like, it only happened this many times. She's like, I think I would have been over there way more playing, or like, so yeah, it was interesting to have her read through things. And I actually had to cut things from the book because she was like, yeah, she's like, you're making my PTSD go all over the board here, man. She's like, as a former foster youth, I don't want to hear that or be told that or be described as that. And so I think that's another thing that, like, as foster and adoptive parents and are reading, like, introducing this to their children, they can know too that a former foster youth has gone through this. Felicia actually knows more about the book than I do. She's totally fangirled on this. Like, when we were going through the editing, I got to the point where I was like, the editors would tell me to change things, and I would call Felicia up and I was like, hey, so yeah, they're asking about this character, and I forget, was it a brown vest that they were wearing or a black vest? And she's like, oh, it was brown vest. Like, she knew, like, how many, like, she knew all the things more than I did. Like, and like, it almost got to the point where I was like all the time, like, yeah, I know this is my world, but you know it better than I do right now. So like,
that's amazing.
But yeah, it really was. It's really amazing. Right now we're getting ready for Carrie Favole is getting ready to, she's a voice actress, and she's getting ready to do the audiobook for us too. So I'm excited about that also, and for our kiddos that don't read.
I'm excited about that too, because I don't read much. I have a book I've been working on. I think it's about 150 pages, and I've been working on this book for I don't know what, 3-4 weeks at least. I'm terrible. I don't have time to sit and read, but I sit in motion a lot in the vehicle, and there's always Audible, and that's way better than listening to the same 40 songs over and over and over and over and over and over again. So I love that the audiobook. Anybody out there who is an author, if you're not putting it on Audible, shame on you, because I'm only going to be able to read so many books, print books, in a year's time, and it's not a big number. But I can listen to 1,000 ebooks Audible books over the course of the year. So that's one of those places that I don't know why more people don't jump into it. Perhaps it's cost. They just don't think it's as important as it is, but it is important, because there's some of us who just don't have time to sit and read.
No, it's huge. I think, like, and even for our kids, like, I'm totally with you on that too, by the way. Like, there's like actually several books that I'm like, so there's no audiobook, huh? Because I could listen to it, but I don't know if I don't have time to sit and just read it. I could listen to it while I'm doing something else. But and then I have, like, even personally, I have a son with a cognitive disability, and he loves stories, but he can't read. His reading level is never going to be above a kindergartner. And so even with this, like, he's helped me create some of the story. He can't read the book. So, like, for me, it's even important, just with our population of kiddos, that they, going through foster care or adoption, there might be some reason or other that's not cognitive. Maybe it's just that they have been moved around in the system so much that they've never been properly taught to read, but they could listen to an audiobook. And fun fact, it's they actually did a study that they were showing parts of the brain, like they were, doing all the watching how the brain lit up and how a brain was engaged when you're reading a book. The same areas that were engaged when you're reading a book are engaged when you're listening to a book. So I thought that was interesting, because I'm always, like, people are always seem to think that it's way better that you read the book than listen to the book. But I have to push back, and I think that there is similar advantage then, like, after that, hearing about that study, there's similar advantage to listening to the book. I think the worst is just not learning at all. So
Well, yeah, but even if you talk to educators, they know really quickly. They don't do a great job all the time of putting it into practice, but they know that some kids are visual learners. They learn by what they see, they read, they read it, they learn it. Some kids are audio learners. They learn by what they hear. And then what's the third one? I think kinesthetic is the third one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're much more hands-on. And unfortunately for me, I tend to be more kinesthetic than anything. And so, that's great if I have a teacher who's teaching that way. But if I can hear it, that's definitely better than actually reading it, because I'll read and I'll pick up what I read for at least the first 3 paragraphs. After that, my brain just kind of goes off and does its own thing while I'm sitting there. And, I remember sitting in high school, supposed to be reading this thing, and I got a couple paragraphs out of it. And then I'm just, next weekend, last weekend, whatever, the next thing to think about, that's where my brain is. I can't keep focused on what I'm reading that long. As a matter of fact, the book that I spent so much time reading, I've found out the only way I can really read it and pick anything up is they have about 8 to 10 page chapters in this book, and I'll get up in the morning before I go to work. I'll read 1 chapter a day, 8 to 10 pages. More than that, I'm out.
Right.
I've lost.
No, that's a thing for sure. Yeah. No, that's definitely a thing. Like, we all learn and read things in different ways. So yeah, I'm hoping that through this, like, it's really our hope that going back to, like, play, like, that using that too is going to be able to help kids to learn more and get more out of it than that. And again, I'm really proud of it, that it's really stood, as far as the critics and making it through my consultant and different editors, it's really stood. We had one gal that sent me a review back, and my wife Margie had to laugh at it, because we had someone that sent a review back, and it was a good review, but the review said, "This is the most honest and realistic portrayal of foster care that I have ever read before in a book." and my wife is laughing at it, and I'm like, what? That's a good review. Like, that's really, she's like, Darren, you have magical creatures all over this book. This is the most real like portrayal of foster care that she's ever read. And I'm like, yeah, you know what she meant. She's like, I know, but you know, I don't remember magical creatures in our journey through foster care. But like, so it's, but I really do think that we're hitting on issues in there, and we're hitting on the feelings, even to the point where, I mean, they have visitations with the three children have visitations with their mom. And so they're having to work through those feelings of seeing their birth mom, and work through the feelings of being in a new foster home and liking being in the new foster home, but still missing their mom a lot, and wrestling with all that. So
yeah, we've seen a lot of those struggles. You know, if I go back to the story of K and A, just because that's privacy rules, I can't give you their real name.
Right.
They
sound like they're from Men in Black, though, so that's kind of cool, like Agent K, Agent A.
There you go.
Hey, don't tell the secrets of who they really are now. but that's one of the parts of their story is the little boy was the target of abuse, and for quite a while he had to do visits with his biological mom, who was the abuser in his life. And that's something that most people don't even think about. Mm-hmm. And I think as foster parents, we have that a little bit more of a perspective to see some of those struggles that kids go through. And I think it's great that you're letting that part of the story show through as true, because nobody wants to believe that an abusive parent gets visitation.
Right. And it's so, and one thing that I'm trying to broaden too with, even just with parent, like the general public and educators and different things too, is, so one thing that I wanted to make sure that I did, because this has been my, not all of my experiences, but a couple of my experiences with birth parents was that, like we have had the situations where there was abuse, and there were like, it was definitely an unsafe situation, but there have been some situations where we've had too, where they just, they were just down on their luck. And so in the book too, with this one, their mom is just down on her luck. Like she didn't do, like she has, I guess, spoiler alert. So their mom, I guess it's not really a spoiler, it's at the beginning. She has 3 jobs. Like she's a single mom, and she's just trying to make it with 3 kids. And all she can afford is this podunk apartment. She has 3 jobs, so she never says. So the oldest, Charlie, is in charge a lot of the time. He's taking care of everyone. And Gruhit has a lot of remembrances of his mom coming in late at night between jobs and singing him to sleep. Like he would wake up, but then she would sing him back to sleep before she had to go to her next job. And so it just got to the point where she just couldn't catch a break, and she could, like, they eventually found out that, you know, like mom's never home to take care of the kids. And so it's, I guess what, like we're trying, I want the general public to know, because I feel like there's the stigma that all kids in foster care must have come from crack homes or something like that, where it's not. Like with Gruhit, it's not the case. Like he's getting made fun of at school a lot, and kids are assuming all this stuff. But his mom's just really, like, she just can't catch a break, and she just really needs someone to help her. Until that I can't go into, because there's going to be a lot more in the second book that goes into that. But she, like, where he's just always feels bad for his mom, and once has that struggle of, I really want to go back home, and he understands that it wasn't safe for him to be in that situation, but at the same time he knows his mom really loved him. And so it's this struggle of, like, even like, what do I call my foster mom and dad, because I feel like I'm betraying my mom, because I don't want to call, like, I really love my mom and she loves me, but I don't want to call the foster mom because she's not my mom. And what do I do with that? And just even paying attention to how the foster parents are treating the birth mom and stuff like that. And they're really, like, I made sure that the foster mom, she's writing encouraging notes to her all the time, and different things like that. And not all the kids have like this like Gruhit kind of has like this more like happy-go-lucky, I'm glad that they're connecting well and they feel good about my mom, but not all the kids have that happy-go, like, in they feel that the foster parents are out to get them no matter what, and different things like that. So I feel like these are conversations that really need to be had, like in a foster home, and even like with in certain situations with birth parents, because there are a lot of feelings and emotions going on with the kids. And it's kind of the elephant in the room, right? Like they're if a kid's in foster care, they're having these thoughts anyways. Like they're thinking about their birth parents, they're thinking about you as the foster parents, or the, like, even if it's an adoptive open adoption, like they're thinking of you as the adoptive parents. Like, I love you guys, but at the same time, I have my mom that I miss, and or my dad that I miss, and the emotions have to be talked through, because, like Jason, what you were talking about, it just gets kind of shoved under the carpet and lays dormant, but it's never dealt with.
You know, it sounds like this book ought to be some sort of required reading for anybody who's looking at becoming a foster parent, because there's so many parts and pieces here that are so important that when we started, I don't think we had a clue about.
No, we didn't. And the one thing that I was thinking about while I was sitting here listening is I love the fact that this book presents opportunities for discussions, and not just discussions in the foster home or the adoptive home, but open it up to schools and teachers and kids, because I know one thing that some of our kids struggle with is when they talk to their friends about, yeah, I'm adopted, the other kids, they have no idea. And some of the questions that our kids get can be really hurtful, and they're not even meant to be hurtful. It's just because it's unknown and it's not talked about enough. And so I think that's what I'm really taking away is I love the fact that this is going to present so many opportunities for discussion, for change, for our kids. And I just think that's amazing.
Yeah, and I'm excited too. Like, there's even the part in there where the only reason kids know that he's in foster care, like, I feel like our kids feel like when they go into school, like if they're adopted or in foster care, like people they think that just everyone knows. Like, we've even had teens that have gone to high school and they're just like, everyone knows I'm in foster care. And we're like, did you tell them? And they're like, no. And we're like, well, we didn't tell them, we can't. And your teachers can't tell them. So unless you tell them, no one knows you're in, no one knows that you're in foster care. Like, so, but like, even like in the book, like Gruhit, like what happens is his sister blabs in order, like she's Miss Happy-Go-Lucky and wants to like make friends. So she uses that to make friends and just chats away and blabs. And so that's how the other kids find out that but it's dealing with those emotions then too. Like, now everyone knows I'm in foster care because my sister blabbed about it without my permission. And so him having to deal with that betrayal and like feeling hurt because now kids know something, like his dirty little, like what he sees as his dirty little secret that he didn't want out. So yeah, I think it would, for schools, I think it's a must, because I think it's important for educators, but the kids in the classrooms, any kid needs to know, like, to empathize with kids. Like, what if they find out that a kid in their class is in foster care? What if they find out they're adopted? What if they find out their parents are going through a bad divorce? Like, they need to figure out, like, how are these kids feeling? What are they going through? Like, they need to know, like, they feel betrayed, they feel scared, they feel like they're less than you. So that, like, through that, like, teachers can like carry this conversation of how do we make them not feel that way? Because it affects, I feel like once that's out and once a child feels like that, it impacts their whole learning environment, because they don't feel safe at school. So now they can't learn because they don't feel safe. They feel less than everyone else. And they're just trying to survive in the school system. And I don't know if the general public sees it to that degree. They just think that, oh, that poor kid. Well, yeah, that poor kid is struggling through something that we need to help them through, but it's struggling so much that it's impacting their learning. Like, they are going at school and they cannot concentrate on addition facts right now, because all they're thinking about is, all my classmates know that I'm in foster care, I'm less than them, and I have to somehow figure out how to belong, how to survive the day, and how to make it back to my foster home, which I'm not even comfortable there yet. So, I mean, it's a lot for a young kid.
Oh yeah, and you know, with teachers, I think teachers who are listening, that's something that you need to know the power you have there as well. And because you can set that tone for these kids. I had one particular teacher we reached out to recently and said, hey, there's some things you need to know. We've got a kid. He's, who's in your classroom. He's adopted, but he went through a real rough deal in the beginning. And we've worked with professionals, psychologists, that sort of thing. And here are some of his coping mechanisms. And here's what you're going to see when that coping mechanism shows up. And when it does, here's some effective ways to deal with it. Because if she doesn't have that piece of knowledge, one particular kid, he struggles with dissociation. When his amygdala fires up, when he goes to fight or flight, he dissociates, which means he's no longer there. He's not present in the room with you. And I know that because I've seen it happen. And I know that because I think it's one of my own coping mechanisms. But we're not going to talk about my own issues here. But we talked with a play therapist who's working with him a lot and said, hey, how do we deal with this with school? And got some tips from her that we could pass on to the teacher as well. But that teacher has so much, as long as you give the teacher the knowledge, they have such an ability to be able to step into that in a healthy way and build some stuff around this that's healthy for the kids, as opposed to letting the kids go all Lord of the Flies in the classroom and turning it into whatever kids will turn it into. Because I don't know about your elementary school. Mine may have just been specifically bad or weird, but the first time I was ever called a racial slur was in second grade, right? Like, these kids aren't always angels, and I'm not even mad at that particular kid, because in second grade somebody learned that from a parent. That's where that came from. But that stuff is there. It's the kids deal with it, and a teacher has the not just the ability, I think the responsibility to set that tone, to say, hey, here are some important things that some things we're going to live by in this classroom. Here's some things we're going to do. And not allow that stuff to be what it's all about, so the kid can get some education. Because just like you said, sitting there knowing how to do double-digit addition is struggle enough in second grade. A kid doesn't need to be trying to figure that out while he's worried about what everybody else thinks, because he has this unique situation that nobody else has in the room, and he's bothered by what's going on and can't take the time to understand the school lesson.
Well, and I mean, that's the thing. The teacher inadvertently said something that hurt his feelings too. And so that automatically closed him off to her. He was like, I'm done. She's mean to me. She told him he needed to get his hearing tested. And it really upset him, because he's like, I can hear just fine, Mom. And I'm like, I know you can, but we have to be willing to talk and open the discussions, because if you don't, you can't change anything. And so I think that's the most powerful thing. Is I really feel like this book is going to help change some things.
Well, and one thing that and that I want to make sure that I get out to is that a lot of what we do at Transfiguring Adoption, whether we're doing our movie reviews or whether it's something like this or our play therapy type stuff, or I guess I should say playful engagement activities, is we're creating this atmosphere where we can out loud do wonderings. Because a lot of times our kids are thinking things, and we can't just assume that because they're not talking about it that they're not thinking it. Again, I'm going to go there. I have all these studies that I've read, and I can't say, well, it was the Johnson and whatever stuff. Trust me, there's a study out there where they went to this support group or some sort of group where there were foster parents and there were kiddos. And they had, they had childcare and they had the adults. So they go to the adults and apart from the kids, and they said, how often are your kids thinking about their birth families? Are they thinking about them every day? Are they thinking about them once a week? And so, the parents kind of, I don't remember the exact responses, but it was to the effect of yeah, our kids might think about them periodically. It might be now and again. It might be, and they posed the same question and scenario to the kids, how often are you thinking? And every single kid said they think about their birth family every day. The takeaway was,
I'm pretty sure that was the Johnson and whatever study. I remember that one.
Right? The Johnson and Smith.
that was actually Melissa Corcoran talked about that when we had her on. I forget again.
Melissa Corcoran would know. She said it was Johnson and something.
It was. Oh yeah,
we're just going with that for today. I like it.
But it proves that our kids, like, we need to wonder things and get our kids to talk because they're thinking about stuff. And with this book, again, and any of the things that we do at Transfiguring Adoption, we're trying to take this approach of how can we make these out loud wonderings. So Gruhit's having an issue at school. So that gives me permission, after I've read this book with my child, I read a chapter with them, I can now say, wow, Gruhit had this girl's bullying him. What do you think that feels like? And that gives my child permission now to talk about bullying, to the point where we can talk about bullying, but then eventually bring it back around to where I can say, have you ever felt like that? Does that ever happen to you at school? And well, we've already talked about it. So now it's out in the open. We've talked about and usually when the kids are talking about the issues, like if I just say, how do you think Gruhit feels? Well, they'll start answering that question, but where do you think they're getting the ideas from? From their own life. So that's the reason they know how the characters are feeling, because they feel that way. And so it just really opens up, like, wow, I didn't know you were feeling that way, or I didn't know you were being bullied at school. Like, and then that is awesome, because then as a parent, that allows you to step in if you need to and say, hey, do you need me to go to school and talk to the teacher? Do you need me to do this? And it might be bad enough where it's more of a conversation of, I am going to do this. It's not your fault. You're not, like, don't be embarrassed. This is what adults do. Like at this point, like, but it goes through the back door instead of confronting it, where a kid is going to feel embarrassed about it. And I think we need to be more intentional as adults, educators, parents, to just open wonderings and trying to figure out what our kids are thinking. Because just because they're not talking about it doesn't mean they're not thinking about stuff.
Oh yeah, and it doesn't mean that stuff isn't happening either.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really excited myself to sit down with the kiddos and read through this book, just because when you can have those discussions with your children, it makes your children feel like you care and you're interested in them and you want to be part of their lives, and you can really build some connections there. And when kiddos come into the system, that's really hard to do in the beginning, is to build connections and build trust and honesty and things like that. So, I think it's a really good thing, and I'm really excited to start it with my kiddos, just to see where the discussions lead.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll go ahead and tell you guys. So people can take a look at the book. We're taking orders right now in the book, depending on when this comes out. So like Jason was mentioning, October 19th is 2021 is when the release date is. But we have pre-release books right now. So we actually have, like, the printers actually sent us pre-release copies of the book. So I have those in my office right now that people can order. But that's at Magical Creatures without the last E.com. GoDaddy told me if I wanted the actual correct spelling of the domain, I was gonna have to pay like $1,000 or something like that, and it was like $5. If I left out the E, it was like $5. So I'm like, you do the math. Which one am I gonna choose?
Right.
So it's Magical Creatures without the last E.com. You can go there, and we actually have our Playful Engagement activity book that already came out, but it goes along and it complements the book that's coming out now. So you can take a look at that. And right now, so if it's within the first, when this comes out until the end of November, I'm going to be autographing books that are going out in the mail from our website.
Oh, cool.
If you get them from Amazon, I can't control that. So, but if you get them from our website, I'll be autographing them, so you get an autographed copy.
Awesome.
Well, this should come out on the 7th of October. And, well, hang on. I just lied. I'm looking at the wrong month on my schedule.
September.
I'm not that smart. Don't blame me. I can't help it. I'm not that smart. Should come out on the 5th of October. I was only 2 days off.
That's all.
Yeah, it is only 2 days.
Yeah, well, the 5th or the 12th, but it will be before the book goes released. So I have to look at the content schedule because I should have it all off the top of my head, and I am awesome like that I can guess kind of close. So it's going to be the 5th or the 12th that it's coming out, which will at least a week before the book's release. So, yep, you said Magical Creatures without the last E.
.com.
.com is the website, and you can go there and pre-order it there. Excellent. Yeah, because that's one of those things that I think people need to be a little bit more aware of is that, hey,
Absolutely.
just because you can get it from Amazon doesn't mean you always should.
Right.
No.
I mean,
Actually,
Amazon is my friend. I love Amazon. I'm not going to lie.
I will tell you guys, if you get it from our website, we get more profit. Amazon takes a hefty chunk. And and I'm not saying that because the author gets paid more. I'm saying that because we're running a nonprofit. Transfiguring Adoption has published this book. And so we're able to put the profit back into our services and programs helping kids if you get it through our website. The other thing too, I'll tell you guys is if people want to join our Facebook and Instagram pages for the book, again, it's at Magical Creatures without the last E, and there they can connect with us and follow us and have conversations with us. But all of that helps us to reach more people and to help more families. So
Absolutely.
we're really
We'll have to
excited to
make
be a part of
sure
it.
that all goes in the show notes and everything. But I'm kind of interested. You hinted that, this is not going to be the only book. Are we looking at a really big series here? Or?
Wow, Amanda, you caught that one. Yeah, I'm going to throw it back to your listeners. It's totally dependent on them. I will say that the board at Transfiguring Adoption really pushed me to get this book. I've told people when the activity book came out, I was really hesitant to put the book out because it's based on a lot of fun memories that I had with my kids. And putting that out in the public, like you're like putting it in front of critics, and I'm like, I don't want to lose those good memories with my kids or tarnish them. But the board, everyone's been really encouraging, and it's been really good. So the first book's out in end of October. If it succeeds, the board at Transfiguring Adoption has told me I need to do at least 2 more. So Gruhit's Strife, which is the second book, is already in the works. And if this book performs well, it'll come out next year. So the second part of Gruhit's adventures will come out, and the third book will be not the end of his adventures, but the end of the adventures that you join him with. So, I mean, if it really goes well, I'll tell you you want to hear? I don't think I've told anyone else this outside of the board talking about it. So my wife has a crazy idea. Do you guys remember the Babysitters Club books?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So my wife, who's on our executive team because she's the co-founder of Transfiguring Adoption, she's presented that she would like this to turn into something similar to that, where the first 3 books follow Gruhit's adventures and his siblings' adventures with Mr. and Mr. Wonder, who are the foster parents. But at the end of that, have like another set of books where it's a new set of kiddos and they come to the Wonder's house and different things happen with them. So it keeps going on with different scenarios and different types of kids and different struggles and different things like that. So that's long term. But again, it's totally up to you guys as listeners, like what happens here, like with how people follow us on social media and how people take to the book.
Well, it sounds to me like they've got some work cut out for you.
I was going to say, I'm excited to go on the adventure.
I am too. I'm I'm ahead of you guys, so I'm on the second book adventure, and it's the second adventure is going to be gosh, I haven't thought about this, like talking with anyone, because I haven't thought about telling it to anyone because it's so fresh. The second book is going to be dealing a lot more with how you guys were talking about identity, is Gruhit and them trying to figure out their identity and dealing a lot more with their struggles and their struggles that they have from trauma, like and trying to deal and cope with a lot of that. So it'll be fun because after you've already gone through the first adventure, the characters are already established and you know them. So it's kind of like returning home with some the characters, but we're introducing some new characters that are actually international characters. So we're finding the book one deals with one specific community that are taking care of magical creatures in the United States. And book two is introducing the possibility that there are more communities around the world that have magical creatures, and they have different types of magical creatures. So I'll leave it at that, I think.
There you go.
Hey, we're going to let you tell all the stories you want to tell.
I know, right? I'll just say, don't buy the book. Just get Darren to talk long
right?
enough.
Just keep listening. It's all good. But no, I mean, we've talked about your guys' book and everything, and you know, this isn't our first interview with you, but tell our listeners a little bit more about what you guys do, not just the book, because you guys do a lot of other things.
Yeah, so at Transfiguring Adoption, like we've said before, it is a nonprofit. Our niche is showing foster and adoptive parents or any fun-loving family how to use books, movies, video games, and everyday play to help kids process past trauma. So one of our big services that we offer is a media review service. So there are things like commonsensemedia.com and different things like that, where they look at the movies coming out and they tell you how many F-bombs have been dropped in a movie, and exactly, like if you go to 5 minutes and 32 seconds, the F-bomb is dropped here, and so be prepared. Like our niche is, we realize our kids coming from traumatic pasts, they've already been exposed to that. It's not that we don't care maybe that what kind of language that they're using or being exposed to, but they've already been exposed, and they can use swear words better than I can. Preach. So it's true. Like I learn new things all the time. So instead of, we're not preventing them in our reviews from being exposed to it because they've already been exposed. What we're doing is we're looking at the latest movies, books, and even video games through a trauma lens. So our reviewers are then trying to say, hey, this could possibly be triggering for your child, and remind them about past trauma and emotionally make them relive that past trauma. They're also going through and they're looking at the healthy discussion topics. So if a book like Gruhits Hope, like they would go through and tell you, like, these are all the themes in the book that you can have a healthy discussion with your child about after the movie. And then they go one step further, and in the review, they give you discussion questions. So they tell you like exactly what questions to ask to start a conversation with your child. And they tell you how to do it and why you're asking the questions that you're asking. So it's a phenomenal service. I learn stuff all the time. Like the reviewers are trained, and they're amazing. But yeah, people can find out more about that at transfiguringadoption.com and just take a look at our media review service. And since we talked with you guys, we're also offering workshops online. So we have live workshops that we do with parents as well, and educators. And we also offer self-paced. So they can just download the workshop and go through the whole program on their own. The live ones are nice because people can apply for certificates. So they can work with their foster care agency and see if they'll allow them to get continuing education credit hours for their licensing hours.
Yes. Oh yeah, we always need those. They're hard to come by. You forget about it, and then they're like, "Oh, it's time to renew, and you owe us like 16 hours."
I just want to ask them if does doing these podcasts, does that help? Can we just call that, because we have like 115 or so out there now. That should be enough.
Oh yeah,
to get through, right?
Sure, why not? Absolutely. Hey, we're and with the work, I mean, why not? Like our workshops, like, so with the media review service that I talked about, like one of our workshop is completely my wife takes you through how to use media to talk with your kids. So like even like with the new book coming out, like this workshop, it's called Entertainment Power, and she shows you exactly how to do that with any book or any movie. The other one, the one that we came out with one for educators too, that shows educators how to help kids from traumatic past. The one I like though is we have one for vacations. And so we show foster and adoptive parents how to vacation successfully with kids that have trauma issues or traumatic behavioral things going on, PTSD and sensory issues and whatnot. So that one I have fun with because I get to talk about vacationing at Disney and Universal Studios. So I love it.
Yeah, I don't want to have to talk about that for vacationing because you guys don't have to drive far. For me, that is a long drive. We're not flying with a whole tassel full of kids. That no, sir.
Which is why you need to go through the workshop, because we show you how to have fun after you've driven 24 hours here and you're at the end of your rope already. A sleeping family is a happy family.
When we went on vacation down to Corpus Christi a decade and a half ago, that's one of the things that we did to get down there is we took off. Yeah, what was it? It was right about rush hour time, and for us, we were going to go west for a ways out, across no man's land before we hit a major center of population center out there. So we drove through rush hour traffic through nowhere, and then we turned and went south out of Kansas City, I believe, and we drove through the dark for a lot of hours for good reason, because that made a sleeping, happy, quiet family. And I drive for a living, so it's easy for me to drive in while they sleep. I'm like, hey, this is what I'm used to. I ride in a quiet vehicle all the time.
It just left us really tired. They were refreshed, and we were not.
Nice. Yeah, that can be interesting because they're raring to go then after you get there.
Oh yeah.
Yes, they were. That was the one part we hadn't thought about, but it sure made the ride down there a little bit easier. But
we've had some great vacations. So one vacation we came back with a goat in the back of our minivan with our children. And we stopped at a McDonald's to get this goat out of the back of the minivan so it could go to the bathroom, and we got some looks.
I bet you did. That's awesome.
The kids had so much fun. But yeah, I mean, this goat had huge horns, and we put it literally in the back of a minivan. And we did not intend, when we went on this vacation, had no intentions of buying a goat.
Yeah, we weren't bringing back livestock, but we brought back livestock. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Fun adventure.
That's going in the book, right? Like what the book you're writing, right, Jason? That's going in your book.
I don't know which one that'll go in. I think I have
went on vacation, bought a goat.
Right.
Well, I have 2 or 3 books started, but they're just started. I don't know if they'll ever see the light of day. It's a time issue for me.
Yeah.
I know I talk to a lot of people say, you really need to. I'm like, no. You need to pay me some money to do this because I don't have that kind of time. And my job expects me to show up every day. I can't believe it that they're that picky about it. But they want me to show up every day.
What's wrong with them, huh?
Right.
I'm offended. I'm terribly offended by that. Well, Darren, I really do appreciate you coming in and talking about your book here today, because I'm excited to see more stuff that lines up with our ideals coming out. Things where people can learn about the foster and adoptive community. And if everything goes super awesome, it'll encourage people to kind of normalize it so that they see their role in this as something other than just a spectator.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I really hope that, again, if your listeners want to take action, definitely go on our social media at Magical Creatures without the last E, and start sharing some posts, because the more that we can make people aware of this book, again, it's secondary goal. I mean, it's supposed to entertain people, but like some of the goal too is to educate the public on what's happening. So we can only do that if more people are exposed to what's happening.
Absolutely. And I don't know about you, but I have not yet cracked the Facebook algorithm. I just know that the more people who see it, the more it can be shared, and the more likely it is to make a difference.
Absolutely. The more people that are I mean, just come on, you guys. If you're listening, the more people that are talking about it, the more that it's going to get out there. So absolutely. And I'll throw out the idea too. We actually have, I live in Orlando, Florida. So if you're close to Orlando, Florida, I could potentially go for a book signing event at your venue. But if you're far, far away, I obviously cannot do that. But if we have volunteers of Transfiguring Adoption that live by you, they actually have like a fun little event to put on for kids, where they actually have a step-by-step way to show kids how to draw one of the magical creatures, and have like a fun story to go along with it to make like a fun little event out of it. So if your store, your consignment store, your toy store, your bookstore needs some sort of event to get customers in, we'd love to do that too.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah. great opportunity because
Yeah.
I know we have a kid or two who likes to draw, and they're super talented. At least that's what I always tell them.
Fantastic.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming in here and sharing your time with us today, man. I just wanted to throw a big shout out to Transfiguring Adoption for all you guys have done. I know that you're a foster family. I know you're an adoptive family. I know you've kind of turned your life's work into this thing because it lines up with Amanda and I's values very closely, and that's part of what we're trying to figure out how to do out here and get this message out and change the world, because we know that between 400,000 and 500,000 kids are sitting out there looking for a home today. And whatever we can do to help that not be that size of a problem will change our future, everyone's future, because we will either deal with these kids and help them to grow into contributing members of society, or we will deal with these kids when they're adults and going into the prison system, because the numbers don't lie. And it's such a high probability. And you and I and Margie and Amanda and all the other foster and adoptive parents out here are stepping out on that journey. And I want to see as many people as we can get to join us on that journey.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys so much.
Okay, citizens of Foster Care Nation, we want to hear from you. We want to hear any stories that you'd like to share with us, anything that might be funny, inspiring, touching, heartfelt, all of those things. That's what people love to hear. So why don't you send us some of your stories? You can reach us at our voicemail line at 413-FOSTER-3. Again, that's 413-FOSTER-3. Now, we're going to assume that if there's any privacy rules that you need to follow, you've already followed them and changed any names that need to be changed, because we will play some of this on the air. We look forward to hearing from you. Now, this voicemail has a limit of about, I think, 10 or 15 minutes, so anything longer than that, just contact me at jason@fostercarenation.com, and we can sit down and talk about your whole story. Okay, Foster Care Nation, thank you for listening to Darren's story. Now take his knowledge and wisdom to heart so you can create love and healing in your family and community. Be sure to come back next week. We have new episodes every Tuesday. If you would like to share your story as a guest, you can reach us at jason@fostercarenation.com. You can connect with other like-minded people on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/fostercareuj. And don't forget, we have a Patreon account where you can support our mission for as little as $5 a month. It's at patreon.com/fostercarenation. The links to everything are in the show notes on your podcast player or at fostercarenation.com. And as always,
You are so super awesome. I think you guys are cool. Yeah. Thank you for listening. Thanks.
Unparalleled Studios.